The NFL Top 100 is right around the corner. Who is the best player in the NFL? Plus, what's going on in Minnesota? And do some organizations have buyer's remorse with the head coaches they've hired over the past 18 months?
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. He is Tony Wiggins. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for making us your first. What'd you say?
Nothing. I just saluted.
Oh, you saluted. I thought you couldn't hear me or something. Anyway,
Nah,
thank you so much for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow wherever you get your podcast. Man, I thought I'd even check my mic. I was like, did I hit mute on this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Did I? Either way, Tony is keeping me on my toes.
Right. That's right. Somebody has to.
Hey, somebody has to. And we're about to keep our listeners on their toes. The NFL's Top 100, they released a clip earlier this week of players talking about who could be the NFL's top player and best player. And, well, I think a lot of people are going to say Patrick Mahomes. What do you think? Do you think he's going to be at the top of the rankings?
I think if you don't say Patrick Mahomes, everybody's going to call you silly and say that you're just clout chasing or making up stuff because he's the best player in the league. But the way that I'm going to look at this is I'm going to say, who do I think is going to end up being the MVP? That's kind of how I'm going to say who the best player, because everybody knew Michael Jordan, he won, what did he win? 5 MVPs, but he was pretty much the best player in the league his entire career. So we know how this goes when we talk about the MVP and who we think the best player. I think Mahomes is the best player in the league, and I don't think anybody else thinks anything otherwise. But for the sake of this, I'm going to come up with some other name.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Can I give you a hint?
I just said you were going to keep me on my toes. You obviously did at the beginning of the show, and now you're about to just 2 minutes into it. So let me sit down. I'm prepared. Go ahead.
Joe Burrow.
Oh, man. What?
Yeah. So
he's the guy I cover. You think he's the best player in the league?
I think look, if there's somebody that's going to challenge Patrick Mahomes, that's who it is. And he has the stuff around him too. Not only is he great and is he talented, but he has a bunch of stuff around him that's going to help him accomplish his goal. I think you're talking about 40 touchdowns this year, possibly 2 1,000-yard receivers. And I also think, and now watch this, I think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC. Even in that tough division, I think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the AFC.
Ooh, yeah,
I think now Jacksonville has a chance to do that too, but because they're going to win a bunch of division games, in my opinion. But I just get this feeling that the Bengals are going to be the best team, the number 1 seed this year.
I think that's the path to him overtaking Mahomes.
Right.
This has been a 2-year run for the Bengals. It turns into a 3rd year. Tyler Boyd in a contract year. T. Higgins. There are some guys where this could be certainly not a last dance by any stretch, but this first era, this first run by the Bengals, it could look different next year. And so, given how they added Orlando Brown Jr., is the scene set? Is the script set for Joe Burrow to make an MVP push and the Bengals to be the top team in the AFC? I certainly could see it. And so that's what I think needs to happen. Because during this run, it's not like the Bengals were the 1 seed or the 2 seed last year. Part of that had to do with what happened with Damar Hamlin. And if they had won that game, then maybe they would have gotten the 2. They wouldn't have gotten the 1.
Right.
2 years ago, they came out of nowhere. And so this is the year where you certainly hope there's no other emergency surgeries right before training camp. He had that appendectomy last year, where you can see the best of Joe Burrow early on in the season. In 2021, he was coming off of the knee surgery, and obviously it took him a little bit to get into a rhythm. So I can see the path. And some will laugh at that and chuckle because he is not the quarterback that is going to wow you with the crazy throws like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert. He doesn't have the size speed combo ratio, whatever you want to say, that Allen has. And yet I watched Tom Brady dominate for 2 decades. And I'm not saying Burrow's Brady, but I do think that he has a lot of Manning's and Brady's best qualities. That's wild to say, I know, because you're talking about 2 of the best quarterbacks ever. But how he's completely changed a franchise. You remember how the Colts were when Peyton Manning was drafted?
Absolutely.
It completely changed. He completely changed not just the fabric of the team, but the city. Mm-hmm. Indianapolis is a much different place because Peyton Manning was there. And I think Cincinnati's felt that since Joe Burrow was drafted 3 years ago. I also see the cerebral part of it and the leadership qualities and some of the other things that Brady has. So we'll see. It would not shock me. And I've had a front row seat with Joe Burrow. That said, I don't know how you don't say it's Patrick Mahomes right now. And I get it. I get it. I see the path to maybe him getting dethroned at some point, and Chiefs fans will crush me for saying that. But there's a path to that. That happens. Mahomes will always be near the top, I think, is for the foreseeable future. But Burrow's right there. Let me ask you this. What about non-quarterback? Because to me, I think right now it's Justin Jefferson. And that could change, but he's just been so dominant with a quarterback that I don't consider elite. And so I would have Justin Jefferson as my number 1 non-quarterback, which I'm sure you're going to go with a defensive player. So go ahead.
Nope. I'm going with another wide receiver, but I don't have to leave Cuyahoga County. I think it's Jamar Chase.
Oh. Man, see, if Bengals fans listen to this, they're going to crush me. They are going to crush me because the guy from Jacksonville's picking big. It's Hamilton County.
Right. What is it? What is it?
It's Hamilton County.
All right. Skyline. I don't have to leave Skyline. Chili. There you go. I'm going to pick Jamar Chase. And see, it's not for me. It's not. Now with this one, this is not who I think people will think is number 1. Mm-hmm. I think Jamar Chase is just better than Justin Jefferson, and I'm in the minority because people are in love with Jettas, and they should be. He's a fabulous player, right?
Yeah.
It's something about Chase, man. It's just it's something about a dude that just like day one, he walks in, catches a touchdown, drops the ball, and I'm like, okay, it's on. All of that stuff y'all was talking about them drops. I just think he's real spectacular. If there's one thing that might hinder him, is that the other guy on the other side is really good too, and they're gonna spread it around.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree with you. I think it's funny because when I rank these guys, I would have Justin Jefferson as the number 1 receiver. Let's just go receiver. Mm-hmm. But that's based on what he's done, not who I would take if I was drafting them for my team. Because I'm not betting against Jamar Chase ever. He's the guy who beat Jalen Ramsey with the game on the line. And if Quentin Spain would have forced Aaron Donald inside, we're having a completely different conversation about Super Bowl 56. He didn't. He had the double team with Trey Hopkins, and there's a reason neither guy's in the NFL anymore, but had the double team ready for Aaron Donald. He beat it to the outside and tackled Burrow probably a half second away from the one of the craziest plays, if not the biggest play in Super Bowl history. So that's Jamar Chase as a rookie after taking a year off. Like, he's a freak show. Like, I agree with you. I couldn't bet against him. I think this is the year to me where we see another gear potentially from both of those guys. And they might not even be top 5 in this NFL ranking. We'll see this NFL top 100. Mm-hmm. But I think that they will vault to that this season, and next year we're going to be talking about them in the top 5. And who knows, like you said, maybe Burrow will be number 1.
And see, the thing is, I do it. I'm doing this the way I do basketball or the way other people do basketball. Mm-hmm. And I had a big time debate with my sons and all of their cousins. You know, they tried to gang up on old school, right? And
about what?
Because everybody's sitting here watching Nikola Jokic And I'm watching it too. And see, to me, he's always been this good. Everybody else, he's just a number. Not me. He's always been this good. But now you get the proverbial right nowism. And what I mean by right nowism, he's playing the best basketball in the world over the last couple of months. But people just go, he's the best player in the league. And I just look at people and go, well, what about Giannis?
Mm-hmm.
What if Milwaukee was in the series and they were going head to head and Giannis was steamrolling down and picking his dribble up at the top of the key and dunking all into everybody's face? Who's gonna stop him from getting to the basket when he wanted to get there? And how many of those shots Jokic shoots would Giannis stuff him right back in his face because he's 7 feet tall and he's athletic? So my thing is it's just the right nowism, man, that gets to me, because just 6 months ago, everybody said the Greek Freak was the best player in the world, but because they're out and there's other guys in here and he's showcasing and doing it, they did it when Kawhi Leonard was playing with Toronto. So he's better than LeBron. It's sometimes it's the right nowism. So I'm actually flipping that around and I'm doing it in football. And I'm saying, no, if Joe Burrow, and if they're the number 1 seed, and he reminds me, you said Brady, right, but I'm going to go to Brady's father and say Joe Montana. That's what he reminds me of.
Sure.
Joe Cool.
Sure.
So the thing is, if he wins, he's going to have all the narratives, all the storylines, and then we'll get all of the debate shows coming back saying, has he surpassed? No, I'm gonna tell you right now, I think they're gonna be very successful this year on the field, and usually the best player on the team that might be the best team is the one that everyone says is the best player. So that's how I come to that conclusion.
Up next, what the heck is going on in Minnesota? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is a one-stop shop for all things sports wagering. It is America's #1 sports book. And guess what? You right now, if you're a new customer, can get a $2,500 no sweat first bet. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win, up to $2,500. So whether you want to wager on the latest MMA fight or an upcoming boxing match or Major League Baseball or the NBA draft or the NFL season, which, man, Tone, it's going to be here right around the corner. I mean, training camp is going to be here before we know it. FanDuel is the place to go. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. There's no better place to bet than America's #1 sports book, FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
The official Locked On NFL podcast on a Wednesday is right here in your face with James Rapien and Tony Wiggins. We appreciate you making us your first listen because it's your team every day. We're going to talk about soda. That's what we used to call Minnesota when I was stationed in North Dakota. We just called it soda, S-O-T-A, right? There's a bunch going on in the land of the Minnesota Vikings, letting go players, giving up on players, putting players on a trading block. And you wonder, Adam Thielen is gone. You wonder, who's next? Well, Dalvin Cook is now gone. And apparently Danielle Hunter is on the trading block. So what is going on in Minnesota? They better have players in development and have guys that they know, because we talked about Justin Jefferson. They're going to waste his good years if they don't have guys that can play for the people that they're letting go.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Justin Jefferson is going to get paid. And so is this them preparing for that? I'm not sure. I look at Kirk Cousins' contract, and he's in the final year of his deal. So what are you really doing? If you subtract Dalvin Cook, let's say Danielle Hunter is not on the team this year, what's the point of having Kirk Cousins? You ain't winning a Super Bowl. And so if you're going into retool mode, he's 35, his age 35 season, why not completely go all in? And I think I've covered teams that have tried to do this, Tony, which is be competitive and retool for the future and do both. And it is literally the hardest thing to do in sports, to toe the line and be competitive and try to compete for championships while also setting yourself up well for the future. It really, it's not a good way to go about it. And I think if you have Kirk Cousins on the team, you're still saying, all right, we want to compete now. This is the team that won 13 games last year, that traded for TJ Hawkinson, that some expect a Hawkinson extension to get done. Obviously, Justin Jefferson, they want to keep around. So if you're doing all of those things, are you keeping Kirk? What do you do? And so I think it's a fine line that they're trying to maneuver. And who knows? Maybe they get something done with Hunter. Maybe they just keep him. And it's just, now we're just talking about them moving on from a running back and an aging receiver in Adam Thielen, who I don't blame them. It might be that simple. Or maybe they are trying to do what's extremely, extremely hard, rebuild and retool on the fly while competing. I wouldn't advise it unless you have to. And if they want to do that, I think trading Kirk Cousins would have been the best option, because I think there's a certain head coach in San Francisco that would have welcomed Kirk with open arms, and you just reacted. So go ahead.
You just read my mind. I was just going to ask you a question. If Kirk Cousins played for the 49ers, would they be the favorite to win the Super Bowl this year?
I mean, they might, but I'm not going to believe in Kirk Cousins until it happens, even with that coach, even with those weapons and defense.
Yeah, because he makes me look, Shanahan will make me look like I'm good at quarterback, right? So
it's tough. Yeah, I agree.
Kirk Cousins is, when I think about him, the word that comes to me is conundrum. Because when you look at his numbers, and I try not to be an all numbers dude, but because I'm that way, I don't want to be the anti-numbers guy either and say that the numbers ain't lying. You know, I don't like him in big games, but you could say that about 2/3 of the quarterbacks in the NFL, because most of them shrivel in big games, because usually in big games they're playing against another quarterback that's really good and somebody has to lose. But Kirk Cousins is going to go down as one of those guys that you will always use this phrase 20 years from now when you're trying to talk about football to young people. You had to be there. Mm-hmm. And normally you say you had to be there when you're talking about someone who was great and someone is questioning it. But it's the flip, it's the reverse with him. He's going to be somebody the numbers reflect was a great player. But then I go, well, you kind of had to be there, and you wouldn't think that. And that usually you don't use the old you had to be there when you're trying to actually tell someone that someone isn't as good as the numbers reflect or say that they are. So I don't think they're ever going to win anything with him. I mean, we sitting here saying that a team that's as good as San Francisco, we aren't sure if they will win with him, right? But I tell you what, you could do a lot worse. And there are a lot of people doing a lot worse at quarterback. And one of the most difficult things to do is to lose competency, because that's what he is, to lose that and then have to try to find another guy after he's gone. It's hard, man. It's hard. Look at Washington. It's hard. Look at the Colts, what they went through when Andrew Luck. It's hard to try to find Jacksonville and Cincinnati prior to, their good fortune now. It's hard, man. It's not an easy thing to do. So shout out to Kirk Cousins, because shout out to Luke Braun with Locked On Vikings. But the thing is it's hard to love somebody you don't like. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we just talked a lot about Joe Burrow and the Bengals and how things have changed. And the Jags are a good example of this. And we don't have to use the teams we cover. Let's use the Indianapolis Colts when Peyton Manning arrived. So we'll go way back. If Caleb Williams is viewed in the building, Minnesota's front office, as this star to be, you should go get him. And so if that means trading Kirk, if that means trimming the fat, if that means paying Justin Jefferson a whole lot of money to stink this year, I would be on board with doing that, because you could have a young core really quick that could work, but you have to go all in on it. Being in the middle of the NFL is the worst place to be.
Worse.
Because you're never going to get over the top. You're never going to compete with a lot of these high-end teams. And we saw that with the Vikings last year. No one believed in them. No one thought that they were going to win a Super Bowl, even though they won 13 games, which, think about that, right? And so would Caleb Williams be that guy? Would one of these quarterbacks? I don't know. But that's a discussion I would be having if I'm Minnesota. How do you get from where you're at to the championship level, championship contending phase? And that's fine. You want to trim the fat. I get it. Who knows where Dalvin Cook lands? But to me, You got to find that right quarterback. And I don't think it's Kirk Cousins for what they're probably trying to do. They've been competent for quite some time now. How do you get over the hump? And there wasn't a quarterback in this year's draft that they probably thought was worth moving up for, considering where they were at. That's fine. You take a receiver. Maybe you try to get your quarterback next year.
Yep.
Up next, a couple coaches that organizations might have a little buyer's remorse about. We'll dive into that right here on Locked On NFL.
Third and final segment here on Locked On NFL on a Wednesday with James Rapien and Tony Wiggins. We're going to talk about buyer's remorse. And this is with second-year coaches. I thought about this, and I actually thought of that. How do I frame it? Because I want to talk about a club and a city that should absolutely have buyer's remorse. In fact, it shouldn't surprise me because this coach is on his second head coaching job, and he seems to be headed down the exact same path. He didn't learn anything from his first coaching stint, and it happened to also be in the same division. That is Josh McDaniels. If I'm a Raiders fan, I am sitting here going, I don't want too much more parts of this stuff at all. I mean, he's made them worse, in my opinion. In my opinion, they got worse. And it doesn't look like there's anything better coming on the horizon. And the thing about me, the thing with me is it just looks eerily similar to his stay in Denver. And he's starting to look just like he looked shook after those first 6 games in Denver when he went 6-0. And then after that, it looked like everything fell apart. It looks like he looks like a dude that went back to his ex-wife and 2 days later going, what have I done? I got that same miserable look on my face I had before. And I don't think it's going to end well. I really don't. The messaging, the way things comes across, and Devontae Adams not being on the same page with those dudes, and none of that stuff is good, man. And it looks just like it looked before.
Yeah, I think that's one that it's the obvious one. And since we're doing second year, I can't use Brandon Staley, but I think there are a lot of people that would put him on the buyer's remorse list. The other one, and it's not fair. I look at that Tampa situation, and I don't know what the heck. I don't know what, because they were holding on for dear life with Tom. This year is going to be probably a really down year for them. Who knows? But Todd Bowles is put in a really tough situation. I wonder if he has buyer's remorse for saying, yeah, I'll be the head coach. I do, because I think that's a really tough situation. Last year, they had offensive line issues, and I hated some of his game management stuff. Hated it. But a lot of coaches have game management issues that they can work through and that they get ripped for, and they still don't go 8-9 and all of those things. So just to flip it, I wonder if Todd Bowles deep down was like, man, if this was going to be my next shot after being such a great defensive coordinator and getting back to being a head coach, I wonder if he wishes he would have went elsewhere, because right now Tampa is in such a period of transition. And I don't know, you could sell me on them being a competent team this year. You could also sell me on them being absolutely awful and being in the mix for Caleb Williams.
I think I agree with you. And this wasn't a real good, and part of this now goes to me rooting for African-American coaches, wanting them to get ideal situations. And I'd rather you go to a terrible team like the Jaguars were when Doug Peterson got here than you're on a team that has won a Super Bowl and has challenged for another Super Bowl with the greatest quarterback of all time, and he's getting older. Your cap is non-existent because when you win, you got all these guys you got to pay, right? And they're not really, they didn't stay healthy. It was like everything that could go wrong did go wrong, like Murphy's Law. And then to make it even worse, Arians comes down and walks on the sideline and starts yelling at referees. It's kind of like your dad come over to your house and disciplining your kids. It's like, what are you there for? You know what I mean? So I think it kind of circumvented his authority a little bit. And it made him look, in my opinion, it made him look weak. That big brother had to come down and help you with something. So And I know why Arians did it, and I applaud him for doing it, but really he did him a disservice by doing that, especially in front of the people that he has to lead. So, yeah, it was just a bad situation, man, because now they don't have a quarterback. I don't care what you say, Baker Mayfield ain't the answer, and Kyle Trask isn't either. And I think people are going to believe that they should be winning more games than they actually should. But when you look at their roster, their offensive line stunk last year. They ended up winning about the type of games that they were supposed to win. The same. That's what they were supposed to do with a bad offensive line and an old quarterback.
John Wolford. You better put some respect on his name. He's on
I know Johnny from Jacksonville.
Well, you better put some respect on his name because he's in that quarterback competition too. You telling me John Wolford can't compete with those two?
And the kid from Georgia, Stetson Bennett. No, he's with the Rams. That's right.
Rams.
He's with the Rams.
I think Bennett would start.
He probably would.
You know why? Baker Mayfield, his swag and confidence and all that stuff, I think that's broken.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle, I never bought into him as an NFL quarterback. Kyle Trask, you know him better than I would. And John Wolford's John Wolford. There was a time when I thought Baker Mayfield was that dude. Not like MVP, but like what we talked about Kirk Cousins, like almost like confident Kirk Cousins that is going to be able to lead and do all of those things. And it's just a tad bit immature. And now I think he's just so beaten down. It's tough to rise up after you get kind of put into your place, so to speak. And I think that's the part of it. But man, they got some good players. Like I look, Shaquille Barrett, Jamel Dean, Levante David, Devin White, Vita Vea, Ryan Jensen on the offensive line, Tristan Wirfs, Matt Filer, who I think was a decent signing, Cody Mauch in the draft, who I think is going to give them a boost. Mike Evans, Russell Gage, Chris Godwin. Like, I like a lot of the guys. They drafted Trey Palmerley, a little speedster. But to your point, if you don't have the quarterback and that line gets dinged up at all like they did last year, good luck.
And the NFC South was begging to be taken last year.
The Falcons last week. I told you about the Falcons. I think it's the Falcons this week or this year.
And it's going to get better. This division is going to get better while they're getting older and a little bit worse. So we'll just have to see. But, yeah, I just think that there's probably a little bit of buyer's remorse there. Speaking of remorse that was almost had, Byron Leftwich almost got the Jaguars job. So that would have really been – he got fired too. So that – like we would have gone from the way they feel about Doug Peterson. And I don't know how Byron would have done here, but I don't know if he would have been Doug Peterson. No, he wouldn't have done what Doug Peterson's done. So
no. A heck of a hire. I liked it at the time.
Yep.
And
it's a no-brainer to me.
Way to rebound after the crap show that was Urban Meyer. That's going to do it for a Wednesday edition. Make sure you get to FanDuel.com/LockedOnNFL. And for Tony Wiggins, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening to a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL.